So here's the 9.16 patch notes. We have Camille, Jace, Vi, and Jinx coming in. So this will be very interesting because this is the first time they've added a new class, or not a new class, a new origin. So it should spice things up a lot. I expect every class now, such as gunslingers, blade masters, shapeshifters, and brawlers, to get a slight buff because they have more options now that they can go. But let's dive into the actual notes. So we just talked about the hextech champions, and they have a trait that throws a bomb at an enemy unit with an item and disables all items within a half hex radius for 8 seconds. Or is that maybe a 1 hex and then 2 hex radius for 8 seconds, depending if you have 2 or 4? Okay. 2 hex radius is actually pretty big. So that could shut down a lot of... Imagine like a ranger team being hit by that, or a sorcerer team that stacks up in the back. So that could be pretty cool. Scrolling down a bit more, Camille's ability, the hextech ultimatum, roots an enemy and forces her in-range teammates to target whomever she's fighting. Camille's a blade master, has cost of 1 gold and ability damage 200, 325, and 450. So the ultimate is pretty interesting. It could troll you and you'll focus like the enemy Braum, for example, but it does hasten kills, so it could be useful because it'll turn an 8v8 into like an 8v7, for example, more quickly than your opponent should be able to kill one of your guys. I wonder if she like jumps in or something like she does in the actual game. That'd be pretty cool. Jace disrupts the enemy front line by knocking back an enemy unit with his thundering blow. He then switches to his Mercury Cannon, bringing increased attack speed and range. So this one is a little troll as well, in my opinion, because if there's someone on the front line, say everyone's attacking their front line Cho'Gath, for example, and then he knocks them back, and then your dudes either take 1 second to walk forward to keep attacking the Cho'Gath, or they switch targets, and he lives with like 1 health. That could be pretty troll. I haven't actually seen this in action on the PvE, just bear that in mind, but that just seems kind of weird. But at least Shapeshifter's got a buff since we have not seen much of them lately, at least like a group of them. Vi, ability targets the furthest enemy and charges towards them, knocking aside and damaging every enemy along the way. Once she gets there, she knocks up her target and damages them, and she's a brawler and 3 cost. So this is pretty good, because imagine this is like a better Rek'Sai, because it targets the furthest person, and she knocks everyone up along the way, whereas Rek'Sai is a little special in the mental department, let's just say. One funny thing that could happen is that once she, let's say she's Vi's in your front line, because she's a brawler, she is pretty tanky, right? And then she ults through to their back line. She won't kill the back line, keep that in mind, because she's probably low damage. But then when she gets her ult back again, she'll go back all the way to the other side onto their front line. That could be kind of funny, but we'll see how that actually plays out. Probably great at interrupting people like Karthus, or like maybe you CC Kindred before she gets her ultimate off. I think she's the coolest one so far. Let's see what Jinx does. Ability, gets excited after her first takedown, gaining bonus attack speed. If she scores a second takedown, she pulls out Fishbones, her rocket launcher, causing her attacks to deal AoE damage. So Jinx is pretty cool in combination with Camille, because when Camille ults, everyone focuses 1 target, she gets a takedown, and then I'm assuming she just snowballs from there. She's a gunslinger at 4 cost, and this is actually a lot of damage, especially if it covers 3 hexes total. I wonder how the hexes are formed. I wonder if she targets like the center point of the intersection of 3 hexes, or if they're in a line or something, or diagonal. I'm not really too sure how that's going to work, because if she targets someone and if it hits everyone adjacent to them, that'd be a lot more than 3 hexes, and that'd be frankly pretty broken. But she pretty much gets static shiv on every attack for people in range, which is actually pretty good in my opinion. But we have to see, for all these guys, we have to see their actual numbers, such as their health, armor, attack speed, damage, all of that stuff, before we can actually assess if they're good or not. But in terms of abilities, I think Vi is the best one, but the coolest one might be Camille's, because I really can't say for sure if that's going to be good or not. But let's move on. Matchmaking has some improvements. We should see less streaky scenarios where you would face the same player. I actually don't like this change because I think facing the same player is fine. There are 7 other people, so it's like a 1 in 7 that you face them. I think there's no issue with that, but people cry about that all the time, and that's why they put that in, because they want people to play their game. But I think this disrupts randomness, and I know randomness, people hate RNG and stuff, but you're literally playing a card game. You're asking for RNG when you play this game, and over the course of the game, I think most of the RNG is balanced out, and especially over the course of playing over a season, in terms of matchmaking, it's balanced out. So I actually don't like this change, because then you can prepare like, oh, I don't have to face that person, and I can do X, Y, Z differently. Whereas what we do now, we have to be prepared for anyone. Earth overtime mode, we don't like draws. They aren't fun. I actually think they're pretty fun when you kill someone in a draw. But every 30 seconds, Earth overtime kicks in and speeds things up for 15 seconds. This does 300% attack speed, 200% ability damage, 66% crowd control duration, or reduced crowd control duration, and 66% healing reduction. So what I kind of want to see is how Draven does in this, because he has a lot more attack speed, right? But if he has Bloodthirster, he gets a lot less healing. So pretty much everyone has a third of a, or 2/3 of a Morel and Amakan on them the whole time. But I think this hurts Rangers and Nobles, like all the low damage comps that just tank with like a bunch of Knights or Noble buff, because they all have low damage and they're gonna get easily outshined by the higher damage dealing classes. Because yeah, even though Static Shiv procs more with the attack speed, it's not the same damage as like a Draven or like an Asol ult. Rank changes. Everyone will now be demoted if you lose LP in any games when you start at 0. Yeah, that makes sense. Challenge Grandmaster and Challenger players demote and skip Masters and go directly to Diamond 1. That's kind of weird, but apparently that's how regular League works as well. So some adjustments to LP gains and losses. You'll not feel any changes based on this optimization. Skip that. Player damage. It led to games being longer than intended, especially when fights were close, so we're making some more adjustments. Overall damage should still be less than at launch. So I think the default player damage is like 2 damage per loss. So this definitely is an increase, and games were going way too long. Seeing so many Karthus 2s was kind of a pain, in my opinion. And like full econ to 9, while that should be happening in like some percent of games, is happening in like everyone definitely gets to level 8, and top 2 generally get to level 9 unless they purposely choose not to, if they decide to reroll. So overall, I do like this change. I think games were taking too long, and this should help that. But man, 5 damage. I guess stage 7s, that's where Rift Herald is, so that shouldn't happen too much. Brawlers. Yeah, Brawlers are quite strong. They got their health nerfed at the 4 buff and the 6 buff. We never saw the 6 buff before, but we all know how oppressive Cho'Gath and 4 Brawlers are. But I'm assuming they're nerfing Cho'Gath, so they're nerfing both Brawlers and Cho'Gath. Doesn't make too much sense. I think you only need to nerf one of them. Cho'Gath being the primary one, because none of the other ones are played because of the Brawler buff. They're played because they buff up Cho'Gath. Demons redesigned. Demon basic attacks have 40% chance to burn 20 mana from their target and return 15, 30, and 45 mana to the attacker. I don't understand why they make the burn amount flat, but have the return mana to attacker scale. I think these should just be the same amounts, because there should be some denial on spells. I know it's an unfun thing to have your Sejuani denied, but it's fun denying other people's Sejuanis. I won't lie. The one interesting change is the return mana. So someone like Aatrox can get multiple ultimates off. Morgana can now get more ults off, and it's pretty much giving all demons a semi-mana item. It's a good change though, but it's a little confusing. Imagine being a new player who's never played this game before and reading this, and then there are like so many numbers and different mechanics here. It might be hard to understand for newer players. So maybe in the long run, it's better for the game because it's a cooler mechanic, but I think it's adds a lot of unnecessary confusion for newer players. What I liked about TFT is that all the traits were simple, but the game itself is very complex. So it was not too bad to pick up because ultimately we want this game to get picked up by the general population. So this might hurt that a tiny bit. Ninjas are in such a bad place right now. The only time you play ninjas is in like the Rengar comp with one Akali or in like Blade Masters with Shen. And of course Kennen, but Kennen's for elementals or Yordles or just played alone. Kennen's the only actually strong one. But what I don't like about how they changed it, they buffed both damage and ability power by 10. I don't like how having one ninja is already super strong, but having 4 is only slightly stronger. I think they should make this, instead of a 20 gap, maybe like a 30 or 40, maybe have it be 45 damage and ability power alone, and then maybe 75 when they're together. Because right now it doesn't make sense to go for 4 of them if one of them's just strong on their own, which is what their intention was. So let's look at nobles. Nobles again, I think they're nerfed from the Earth changes in overtime, but bonus armor and magic resist 60 to 70. That does nothing. Sorcerer, and especially this does nothing because games will be shorter, so it'll be harder to find Kale. So Noble's not, they got nerfed. Sorcerers, 3P Sorcerer is just a little too strong due to its versatility. I agree with this. 5%, does that do that much? Probably not, because at 3 Sorcerers, your Karthus and Aurelion Soul, they don't one-shot people, they leave them at like 100 health. So now they'll probably have like 200 health or 150 health, so that doesn't really change that much, at least in the late game. In the early game, this might affect Sorcerers a tiny bit because they cast their spells multiple times, but in the late game, this doesn't do anything. But I do agree that they did need a nerf. Wild is still underperforming. We're just giving it a little bit more, 10% to 12% per stack. I mean, they buffed Rage Blade a bunch of times. No one still uses it, so a 2% stack thing might not be that useful. But we might see... We do have an additional Shapeshifter, and Wilds are good with Shapeshifter, so maybe we might see Wild back in play with the addition of Jace. I don't think Jace is very good, though, but we might see them more. Elise, 450 health to 500. Okay, this is complete. She's still complete garbage. They should revert her player damage so that at least she has one scenario where she'd be good for punishing people who go greedy early game, but buffing her level 1, first of all, no one plays her at level 1. No one plays her at level 2. So, but the only time you would ever play her is at level 2 or level 3, but they don't buff those. That doesn't make sense at all. Spiderling attack speed doesn't do anything. I guess you get Demon Burn procs a little more, but that's actually nerfed since they don't steal as much now. So complete garbage still, don't buy her. Kha'Zix, non-isolated damage, nerfed. I don't think Kha'Zix needed a nerf. He's only used because Cho'Gath's really strong and Voids are really strong, so he's just kind of someone hurting from the system he's in, not because of who he actually is. But he definitely didn't deserve this. He's like such a crappy assassin. Mordekaiser no longer casts his abilities if no enemies are in range at the start of the cast time. Good quality of life change. Nidalee now always heals 2 units when she transforms. I thought she always healed 2 units, but I thought it glitched out when she doesn't. Previously, she would only heal herself if she had the lowest health on her team. Okay, that's why. I never actually noticed that. I'd always get angry when Nidalee only healed herself and not 2 people, because it always says 2 people. Doesn't make sense at all, in my opinion. But now we know it's because of a glitch. Not a glitch, but a bug. Vayne attack speed decrease, ability damage increase at level 2 and level 3. That's probably a good change. She's easily like such a weak ranger, and this gives nobles a little more damage in the late game, which they desperately need. Though with the attack speed nerf, I actually don't know how that maths out, but I think this is an overall damage buff on her passive, but she's a little less scary with on-hit abilities. Let's move on to the tier 2 champions. Braum's health is nerfed by 100. That's fair. It's only at level 1 though, so at level 2 and 3, he's going to be the same exact champion, but mainly at level 2 since we rarely get level 3 Braums. So I guess it hurts if you can't find Braum, which actually is quite often because most people are fighting for him, but this is fair. Lissandra total mana reduce. Yeah, that's good. She's still garbage, but it's still good for Lissandra. I had no idea it was 150 before. That's so high for such a low impact ultimate, especially when she casts it on herself. If she casts it on someone else, it's actually pretty decent because you just stun like their carry, for example. And it's like slight AoE. Lulu, health nerf on her ability. That's good because Lulu's pretty busted right now. She's probably the strongest early game champion, early to mid game, just because, well, health is just OP at that stage because you don't get one shot yet. Fights are longer and she gets to ult multiple times. And I like how they nerf her level 2 and level 3 and not her level 1 in this one. Zed, health buff at level 1 by 50. That doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter a little bit since he is a good first round play if you have no other synergies available. So I actually kind of like this. But I guess he's one of the ninjas who's getting buffed. So he went from slight increase in ability damage. I don't really think this matters that much since his damage comes from his auto attacks, not from his ability damage, because what he does is you just get a huge assassin crit with this ninja attack damage augmentation, and this just isn't part of that, so this doesn't really matter, but his attack speed increase does matter. Aatrox no longer casts his ability if there are no enemies in range. Good change. Evelyn now prioritizes her current target with her ability. Good change, and also the same, doesn't cast it randomly anymore. These are all good changes. Same for Katarina. This attack damage does absolutely nothing, especially since it's only at level 1. So this is, we can ignore it. Katarina's, I don't know, she's funny. But I do like the first change, because then you could still do Beyblade Katarina now, or they brought it back. Kennen no longer casts, okay, same change, that's good. Shyvana Leap AI improved. Yeah, I always thought this was complete garbage. She always jumps, and then she'd still be next to people, and I'd be like, why are you doing that? You should be flying to safety and then auto-attacking from far away. Not really thematic of a dragon, though, to run away, though. But the breathing fire thing's pretty cool. Akali buffed. That's good. She'll probably be better when she's played solo now. Though ninjas in general, it's mainly because ninjas have to be played with assassins, and assassins, frankly, aren't strong. And we didn't see any assassin buffs earlier, so, like, for the class. Ever since they changed the critical strike calculations from multiplicative to additive, they've just been a lot worse. So even though it is a buff, I don't think assassins are back yet. Brand ability damage buffs. This is great. I love Brand. He's my favorite champion by far. He's just, I just love watching his ability bounce around. But this is a good buff. And total starting mana, this is a great change as well. So he gets his first ultimate off faster, but if you want a second one, you really need to itemize for it. Because right now, he isn't even getting his ultimate off in half the games, even at level 2. So there's no point in, or they made a good change in making that requirement from 125 mana to 100 mana, but also stop him from being oppressive if the total mana was only 100, for example. Cho'Gath, okay, finally. Cho'Gath nerfs. Let's go ahead and calculate that. If we do, let's see, at level 2, because that's the most popular one, it's 500 minus 350 divided by 500. So it's a 30% damage nerf. I'm assuming it's the same across the board. That's a pretty big nerf, but it's very warranted because he's very oppressive right now. And Cho'Gath, he's a tank. He's not a mage, you know. He's not supposed to be a high damage dealer. But right now he's both, which should never happen on a champion. Also, this change makes it so that next week's meta or tomorrow's meta is going to be completely unpredictable since the top composition is not quite as good anymore. Karthus starting and total mana changed. So it's still 125 minus 40 is still 85 mana, but his second ult is harder to get. I don't like this change at all. So why does Karthus have 85 mana? It's such a game-breaking ultimate, and he gets it so quickly. So what people do, they get Karthus 2, right? And then they stack him with mana items, so he has 80 mana to begin the fight. Auto-attacks once, then he starts ulting. They could still do that with this new change. By the way, he kills everyone on his first ult. So why do they nerf his second and third ult, but keep his first ult the same? It doesn't make sense at all. Just make his total mana 100 and start him at 0. Like, every other champion has around 100 mana. Why does Karthus have 85 when his ultimate's clearly a one-time thing because it's supposed to kill everyone? Which is fine. I'm fine with Karthus killing everyone, but just make the requirement higher. I guess this nerfs him if he gets his first one interrupted. It's still a nerf, obviously, but it's not how I would have approached it. Kale attack speed reduced. Nobles are garbage right now. Kale, worse now. Even in this patch, Kale isn't being played, so why do they continue to nerf her? Doesn't make too much sense, but it did make sense in that I don't know why Kale's attacking faster than Vayne, for example. Kale has one of the highest base attack speeds in the game, which kind of makes sense. She sometimes does that in League, but I mean, she attacks faster than like 80 carries in League, so that's a little odd. But I disagree with nerfing her because she's not really played right now. I wonder what they saw that caused them to do this. Misfortune buffed at level 1 and total mana decrease. This is a good change because we don't see Misfortune often. Maybe we'll see her more, especially with adding Jinx in. They're more gunslingers, so I'm assuming someone's at least going to try Gunslinger this week. So it's good that Misfortune got buffed. Though 25 mana is quite a bit of a reduction. That means she could get it off multiple times, and she gets it earlier. So her with like a Morale Nomicon, for example, might be pretty devastating. Hush reworked. Now, what they didn't mention is they didn't adjust any of her AI capabilities and targeting. So maybe she's still complete garbage because she ults one person when there's a much better option available. Hush. Item rework now is a 33% chance on hit to prevent the enemy from gaining mana. We're calling it mana lock for 4 seconds. I don't really like this. The current Hush, it's OP. We all know it, but why not just make that one 33%? I think mana locking is kind of weird, right? It's not very intuitive, in my opinion, but because it's called Hush, that means you're silenced, right? It's like the whole point of the item, but that's what they wanted to do. And when someone is stopped, is no longer hushed, they should cast their spell. Whereas with this new mechanic, it's not going to happen that way. The next item's Infinity Edge, increased crit by 50%. So that's a Draven buff. Though it's more of a luxury item to have Infinity Edge, it's still a buff nonetheless. I guess assassins can use this, but again, since they changed how critical strike is calculated, this doesn't really affect assassins that much. Yeah. Ionic Spark, nerfed, but now it stacks. So I like that it stacks now, because if you do get the same item combination again of Needlessly Large Rod and Negatron Cloak, it is annoying when you can't build the same item again. But this nerf was warranted. It's a really strong early game item. Though I will say that within the past 2 days, I have seen this item built a lot less than, say, the beginning of last week. Locket shield duration increased from 4 seconds to 6 seconds. I hate how they changed Locket of the Iron Solari. Why don't they just make it in a circle again or something like that? It makes so much more sense because that's what it does in League, and on the map visually, it's a lot easier for a new player to understand if it's, oh, surrounding units get a shield for whatever amount. But 4 to 6 seconds doesn't really do too much because no one's playing assassins. It's good against assassins. That's really it. So that shouldn't change anything. Still probably bad unless assassins are meta again. But even then, it's a situational item. Morellonomicon, burn damage, 20% over 5 seconds to 20% over 10 seconds. That's actually a very interesting change because spells, they don't... let's read red buff as well. 13% max health over 5 seconds to 20% max health over 10 seconds. So it's a slight damage nerf. Red buff's definitely a nerf because that's just less damage. So it's 10% over 5 seconds, but it lasts double the time as the old one. That's a fair nerf. Red buff, even though it wasn't built that much because it was only because Morellonomicon was OP, but red buff definitely nerfed. I think it is warranted. Let's look back at Morellonomicon. So you don't cast a spell every 5 seconds. Someone does cast a spell over 10 seconds. So I guess this is better against Bloodthirster Draven, Swain, someone with Mormogs. And this makes Morellonomicon more of a anti-healing item, which is what it should be. Right now it's used as a damage item, which is kind of ridiculous, but I think this is still good for Morellonomicon. I'm still going to build it on all the same champions like Cho'Gath, Sejuani. They're still going to use it. Like, they don't really care about if it's over 10 seconds or 5 seconds. Redemption, heal increase. So because this has changed and you can't heal for 10 seconds now, this item got nerfed indirectly, but that also means that this buff means absolutely nothing since, first off, 1,000 health is already full health for like half the champions in the game, probably 70% of the champions in the game. 1,500 health is like way past their full health. So this 1,000 and 1,500 doesn't really do much because most champions have around 1,000 or maybe 1,200. So whoa, that 200 health is really going to make that much of a difference, right? Because this doesn't hit on like any sort of guarantee. So still trash. I like the old Redemption a lot more, where it did some damage to the enemy as well. I don't know why they removed that. It was kind of cool. And it should happen when someone dies, not when they're at 25%. That doesn't make sense at all. I feel like getting rid of like support champions or people who could use something like a benefit on death, it's kind of like a hedge. And in an RNG game, hedging is kind of an interesting tactic. And with the new Redemption, they kind of removed that. Static Shiv, 4 bounces, 90 damage, changed to 3 bounces, 100 damage. So it used to do 360 damage, now it does 300 damage per bounce. So it's a slight nerf. It's actually a pretty big one. Let's see what the math is. 60 over 360, that's like a 16% nerf. Yeah, that's fair. Because it is being built way too often, and they should nerf that. I don't really think it's going to affect Rangers that much since it's not that major. Warmog's armor heal now heals a maximum of 400 health per tick. This mostly nerfs its effect on PvE dragons. Okay, that's good, because sometimes you get trolled against that dragon if you're running a low damage comp such as rangers, sorcerers, and you just can't can't get past the last like 1,000 health or however much he has. So this is a good change because it feels really bad when you can't get the Warmogs. Guardian Angel tooltip updated to reflect functionality. It now properly removes grievous wounds. Okay, thank God. Thank God, thank God, thank God. Because I hate the grievous wounds bug on Guardian Angel. It always feels like it's happening against you. So this is the best change of the patch, actually. MVP. Let's see if it actually works. Health on Resurrection, 800 to 500. Ooh, that actually is a big change. Remember how I said on Redemption how this doesn't mean anything because 1,000 is already full health? Well, 800 is pretty much full health, but 500, not so much. Ooh. Probably you could only use it on the good GA users of this patch, maybe Kennen and Garen with Morellos. But you can't just throw it on any tank just for the sake of doing it. I think this change is good because it should be used for its mechanic, not to get a second tank. New drop mechanic. In rare instances, it's now possible to drop a full completed item instead of 2 components separately. I actually like this change because it increases item diversity and it forces you to adapt more. Because if you build the same exact items every game, it gets really stale. It's what we're doing now. We're all building static shivs, Morellonomicons, and Guardian Angels, and this adds to the item diversity. And I like that it's different from the Dragon and Rift Herald item because that's complete nonsense because someone gets a Yumu's Ghostblade while another person gets Rabadon, Seraphs, or like Rapid Fire. But if it's on the regular Wolf, Raptor, and Krug camp, I think this is completely fine. And it doesn't happen often either where you get a bunch of items. It's only when you get like item forgiveness. So I like that it increases a lot of the diversity in the game. Bug fixes. Spiderlings and Golem can now properly be the target of Frozen Heart, Kindred, Swain, Karthus, Shen, and Vhagar. Oh yeah, I don't know if you guys know, but champions like Cho'Gath, their ult doesn't do any damage to the golems. Though it's interesting that they don't mention Cho'Gath here, so I hope they included that. Because, I mean, his ult needs to hit the golem, right? That just makes sense. Graves now properly gains range with Rapid Fire. I never tried that before, but it's kind of funny. Frozen Heart no longer applies too many slows when stacked. I thought they fixed this already, but I guess I put it in here anyways. Fix some item slots not showing up or being in weird slots. Okay, that's good. Fix win-lose streak gold being granted after PvE rounds instead of after PvP rounds that happened before. Streak gold should be granted at the end of all PvP rounds and no PvE rounds. Okay, yeah, that makes complete sense. Fix little legends having collision after dying and subsequently body blocking players in the shared roulette. I like blocking in shared roulette. Does that mean only if they die and their spot has collision? Or does this mean that all collision's being removed? I know the collision is like troll because someone can troll you into picking another item, which is the most infuriating thing ever, by the way. But it's kind of fun doing it to other people as well. I don't really do it that often because I'm too lazy, but I do like that there is some like bouncing around. Fix Blitzcrank attempting and failing at targeting untargetable enemies and therefore not casting. So this is a good fix for Blitzcrank because when he hooks an assassin, for example, or if it's an assassin is his initial target, he sometimes just doesn't do anything and he bugs out. So that's it for the patch. I think it's going to be interesting this week. I'm really excited to see what happens when the new champions are in. So whenever new champions are introduced, it makes the game a lot more difficult. So you'll be able to tell who the better players are because you can't just force a comp. There are a lot of you could probably get to Diamond just by hard forcing one comp every single game, just because it's so easy to do when there aren't that many champions. But with the addition of new champions, it's harder to get what you want because there's just more things to cycle through. And I'm really excited to see gunslingers because I mean, attacking in so many different directions. Imagine Jinx having the gunslinger buff and dealing like an extra 300 or 400 damage at level 1. That's actually insane. I'm actually excited to try that out. That's probably the first comp I'll try if it presents itself to me. But that should be it for this patch rundown. Thanks so much for watching. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow me on my socials below.